The thing about wormholes that no one tells you is that they are not particularly fond of humans. Sure, sci-fi movies make it seem like a gentle whirlpool, a cosmic teacup ride. But in reality, it's more like a cosmic blender that forgot to ask if you wanted a smoothie or a salsa. Captain Darius Finch knew this firsthand as the ship, Last Hope rattled its way through the galaxy's most infamous wormhole crossroad. "Can someone remind me why we thought this was a good idea?" Finch grumbled, gripping the armrests of his chair as if they were the last life jacket on a sinking ship. "Because we're morons, Cap," replied Marnie, the ship's engineer, her voice crackling over the intercom. "And you're paying me too much to say no." "Too much?" Finch scoffed. "The budget cuts mean you'll be lucky to get a sandwich for this, and not the good kind," Marnie snorted. "Lucky me. Hope it's not the recycled protein paste again." Finch let out a dry chuckle, then turned his attention back to the display screens. The wormhole spat them out like it was tired of the taste, and the view that unfolded was less than welcoming. A derelict alien station hung in the void, its architecture unlike anything in human records. It looked like something an octopus might design if given a degree in existential despair. "Ladies and gentlemen," Finch announced, "we've arrived at what I can only describe as the universe's attempt at modern art." "A masterpiece," muttered Elwyn, the child prodigy, barely audible from his corner where he was busy poking at a handheld device that was probably smarter than the rest of them combined. "Elwyn, any idea what that thing is?" Finch asked, not really expecting an answer but hoping for a miracle. Elwyn shrugged, eyes still glued to his device. "An alien station, or maybe a really intense space-themed escape room." The crew exchanged a glance. Finch sighed. "Well, let's hope it's not the kind where the walls close in." Docking was as fun as wrestling a bear with a hangover, but with a few choice curses and some creative use of thrusters, they managed to slap the Last Hope against the station's docking bay. Finch, followed by his ragtag group of explorers, shuffled into the airlock. "All right, gang, keep your eyes peeled," he said, ignoring the groans from his team. "And Marnie, make sure nothing eats the ship while we're gone." "No promises," she quipped. The station's interior was a graveyard of forgotten technology. Long corridors stretched into darkness, littered with cables that snaked along the floor like dead eels. Consoles flickered intermittently, their displays showing symbols that resembled the fever dreams of a cat who'd found the psychedelic mushrooms. "Cozy," Finch muttered, leading the way. "I've seen haunted houses with more ambience," said Jax, the team's pilot who had an unhealthy fondness for horror movies and bad jokes. Elwyn, still engrossed in his device, wandered off a bit too far, curiosity dragging him down a side corridor. The rest of the team barely noticed until they heard the sound. A hum, building in intensity, spreading through the station like a bad smell. Then a flash, and a holographic interface burst into life before Elwyn. Guys," Elwyn called out, his voice betraying a mix of astonishment and mild terror. Finch and the others arrived just in time to see the holographic display stabilize. Symbols morphed into recognizable characters, forming an ancient riddle. "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 in the evening?" "Great," Finch said. "Riddles, my favorite." "Ah, the classic Sphinx one," Jax volunteered, clearly waiting for a chance to show off his trivia prowess. "Yeah, but what's the answer got to do with this place?" Finch wondered aloud. "Probably something dumb," Marnie said, "like a password or some hidden self-destruct sequence." Elwyn, eyes wide with excitement, started tapping away at his device again. "Sphinx riddles in space," he mused. "Didn't see that coming." "Welcome to my life," Finch said dryly. "Always something unexpected." Usually unpleasant. The holographic display flickered, emitting a low rumble that echoed through the desolate corridors. "Let's not stick around to find out if it's going to applaud or explode," Finch suggested, motioning for the group to back away. "Elwyn, see if you can figure this thing out and try not to open any death traps, okay?" Elwyn nodded, his usual sullen demeanor replaced by a rare glint of excitement. On it, Cap. As the team retreated, Finch took a moment to survey his crew, a bunch of misfits if ever there was one, but they were his misfits, damn it. Ragged, cynical, and sarcastic to the last breath, just like him. He wouldn't have it any other way. "Well," he said, clapping his hands together as they made their way back to the docking bay. "Looks like we've got ourselves a puzzle, folks." "Let's hope it's not the kind that ends with us getting spaced," Jack snorted. "With our luck, it'll probably involve an alien overlord asking us to solve cosmic Sudoku." "I'd take Sudoku over this," Marnie said, gesturing to the eerie surroundings. Back on the ship, Finch settled into his chair, watching the holographic display flicker ominously through the viewport. "Guess we're camping out here for a bit," he muttered, less than thrilled by the prospect. Elwyn was already lost in his device, seemingly oblivious to the potential danger they were in. Finch watched him for a moment before turning to Marnie. "You think he'll figure it out? Kid's a genius," she replied. "Though sometimes I think he's just guessing and getting lucky." "Aren't we all?" Finch said, leaning back in his chair as the *Last Hope* hummed quietly around them. As the crew settled into the waiting game, Finch couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something big. Something that would either make them legends or end them in ways that wouldn't even make good ghost stories. The station loomed outside, silent and foreboding, cradling its secrets like a miser clutching gold. Finch sighed, glancing at the crew. "Here's hoping this mystery isn't our swan song." "Cheer up, Cap," Marnie said with a grin. "If we end up floating in space, at least we'll finally get some peace and quiet." Finch chuckled, the laughter echoing through the cabin, mixing with the quiet hum of the ship as they waited for whatever fate had in store for them next. The crew of the *Last Hope* was in a familiar state of semi-chaos, which was pretty much their default. Captain Darius Finch was slumped in the captain's chair, absently tapping his fingers on the armrest as he considered the questionable wisdom of their continued existence. The alien station loomed outside, an ominous testament to some cosmic architect's midlife crisis, and they were stuck here trying to solve a riddle that could either open doors or incite explosions. Or worse, ask for a credit card payment. "Anyone else feel like a B-list actor in a low-budget horror film?" Jax asked, leaning back in his seat with a resigned sigh. "More like extras in a movie that's not even worth pirating," Marnie replied, fiddling with a piece of equipment that looked like it had seen better days. Much like the crew itself. Elwyn, seated in a corner with his face glued to his gadget, let out a snort. "Guess that makes me the quirky sidekick then. Kid, you're more like the plot device," Finch shot back. "The one who's supposed to know everything but only says something useful halfway through the second act." A brief silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. The alien riddle hung in the air like a bad smell, a puzzle they needed to solve if they hoped to leave this place without resorting to pushing the ship home. Finch rubbed his temples, a headache brewing that felt like it was sponsored by existential dread. "All right, team, let's take a look inside that pile of alien junk. Maybe there's something useful or at least some decent snacks." They grabbed their gear and shuffled back into the station. The corridors stretched out long and lifeless, a place that had definitely seen better days. Probably a few hundred millennia ago. "Feels like we're walking into a tomb," Jax commented, shining his flashlight into the shadows. "A tomb for people who really liked mood lighting," Marnie scoffed, her flashlight revealing a series of consoles with displays that flickered erratically. "Mood lighting or not, I'd kill for some decent coffee. Or a stiff drink. You and me both," Finch said, scanning the area for anything that didn't scream trap. Elwyn, trailing behind and surprisingly quiet for once, suddenly stopped. "Guys, I think I found something." The rest of the crew turned, a collective groan escaping their lips. "Please tell me it's not another riddle," Finch said. Elwyn shook his head, pointing to a console that seemed to have powered up as he approached. "No, but it's connected to the one from before." Finch stepped closer, eyeing the display with suspicion. The alien symbols morphed into something more familiar. Instead of a riddle, it showed a diagram of the station, certain sections highlighted. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Marnie muttered, leaning over to get a better look. "Looks like a map, or a maze, probably a maze, one of those death trap ones." Jax chimed in. "You know, where the walls close in and you get squished like a bug." "Comforting thought," Finch said dryly. "All right, let's split up and see what we find. Stay in touch and don't get distracted by any shiny objects." As they moved deeper into the station, the sense of unease grew. Strange echoes whispered through the corridors, like the ghosts of the builders were having a gossip session about the new tenants. Marnie stopped, inspecting a wall panel. "This place is definitely haunted." "I'd bet my last month's pay on it." "Technically, you haven't been paid in months," Jax pointed out. "Exactly. That's how confident I am." Finch kept one eye on his team's progress, the other on the map Elwyn had found. Each highlighted section seemed designed to pull them further in, baiting them with the promise of answers or just more questions. "Why do I feel like we're the mice in some warped intergalactic experiment?" he wondered aloud. "Because we probably are," Elwyn replied, not looking up from his device. "Only question is, are we the smart mice or the lab rats that end up as cautionary tales?" Finch snorted. "Knowing our luck, I'd say we're the ones they laugh about in the break room." As they reached one of the highlighted sections, the station responded with a low hum that vibrated through their bones. A door slid open, revealing a room filled with alien tech that looked like it had been designed by a lunatic with a penchant for sharp edges and unsettling angles. "Now that's a room that screams hazard pay," Jax said, peering inside. "Or don't touch anything unless you want to grow a third arm," Marnie added. Elwyn, still glued to his device, walked straight past them, eyes scanning the various consoles. "This is amazing. The tech here is centuries, maybe millennia ahead of us, right? So what are the odds it's going to blow up in our faces?" Finch asked. "Pretty high, I'd guess," Elwyn said with a shrug. "But nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?" Famous last words, Marnie mumbled, but they all knew the kid was right. They were here for answers, and maybe a little fame and fortune on the side. And if that meant risking life and limb, well, that was in the job description. While Elwyn worked his magic, or whatever it was that geniuses did, Finch and the others scoured the room for anything that screamed important or "don't press this button." The place was a treasure trove of alien artifacts, most of which defied description but none of which seemed immediately lethal. A small mercy. "Well, what do you reckon?" Finch asked, turning to Marnie. "I reckon we're in over our heads," she replied without hesitation. "But when has that ever stopped us?" "Never," Finch agreed, a grin tugging at his lips. It was a reckless kind of optimism that had gotten them this far, and it sure as hell wasn't going to fail them now. Elwyn was frowning at a particularly complex console, his fingers flying over the controls. "I think I've got something," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "We talking good news or bad?" Finch asked. "Could go either way," Elwyn admitted. "But it looks like it might unlock some more areas of the station, or activate the self-destruct," Jax quipped. "Only one way to find out," Finch said, nodding to Elwyn, who took a deep breath and activated the console. There was a pause, a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, and then the station shuddered. Doors slid open, lights flickered to life, and the station seemed to breathe again, a mechanical sigh that reverberated through the corridors. "Looks like we picked the right button," Marnie said, relief in her voice. "For now," Finch replied, his gaze sweeping the now illuminated hallways. "Let's see what surprises this place has in store." As they continued their exploration, the atmosphere shifted. The station was waking up, and with it came a sense of purpose they hadn't felt before. Whatever this place had been, it was more than just a relic of the past. It was a challenge, a test, and they were determined to pass it. "Feels like we're in a game," Jack said, glancing around with renewed interest. "The kind where the boss fight is just around the corner. Let's hope it's not a game where we're the expendable characters," Finch replied, scanning the map for their next target. Elwyn, still engrossed in his device, led the way, his enthusiasm contagious despite the lingering tension. They moved with purpose, each new discovery sparking fresh hope and curiosity. For all their cynicism and jokes, Finch knew one thing for sure: they were onto something big, something that could change everything if they lived long enough to see it through. "Here's hoping this ends with more than just a good story," he muttered. "I'd hate to die for a plot twist." As they pressed on, the station revealed its secrets piece by piece, each step drawing them deeper into a mystery that promised danger, discovery, and maybe even a chance at redemption. They were explorers, misfits, and reluctant heroes, and for better or worse, this was their adventure. And if it ended in disaster, at least they'd have one hell of a tale to tell in the afterlife. The Last Hope was not a beacon of hope, despite its name. It was more like a flickering bulb in a rundown motel sign, the kind that promised free cable but delivered bedbugs instead. The alien station was now alive and kicking, with lights flickering on like a cosmic wake-up call for an ancient relic that probably should have stayed asleep. Captain Darius Finch stood at the helm, trying to pretend he had a clue about what was going on. "Anyone feel like we just kicked a hornet's nest?" he asked, glancing over at Marnie, who was busy tapping at a console that screeched every time she touched it. "More like a nest of hungry intergalactic lawyers," she replied, wincing as another shrill beep pierced the air. "If this thing starts demanding royalties, we're screwed." Jax wandered in, idly swinging a wrench he'd picked up from somewhere. "Hey, where's Elwyn? Didn't he say something about unlocking more of this place?" "He's probably found a nice corner to drool over alien tech," Finch said, more focus on the map Elwyn had left behind, trying to decide which path would lead them to salvation, and which one to a messy, painful demise. Meanwhile, Elwyn was indeed in a corner, crouched over a console that pulsed with an unsettling blue light. His gadget beeped in a language only he seemed to understand. "This is incredible," he muttered to himself, his eyes wide as saucers. "Hey, genius," Jax called, leaning against a nearby bulkhead. "Found anything that won't get us killed or enslaved by an alien overlord?" Elwyn didn't look up, his fingers flying over alien symbols that shifted under his touch. "I think this station was meant to control something big. Like, really big." "Oh great," Marnie said, arriving to join them, "because that's exactly what we need. More mystery. Maybe it's a giant killer robot. Or a universe-eating superweapon, or," Elwyn said, finally tearing his eyes from the console, "a power source. Something that could make our ship run like it's new again." Finch perked up at this. "Say that again, but this time make it sound less like a pipe dream." "I'm serious," Elwyn insisted, pointing to the console. "If I'm reading this right, there's an energy output here that could power a small fleet. Or our rust bucket." "Well, I'll be damned," Finch said, a hint of a smile breaking through his usual scowl. "So what's the catch?" Jax asked, twirling his wrench. "There's always a catch, of course," Elwyn admitted. "The tech is unstable. It's ancient, barely holding together. One wrong move and we could end up as space debris." "Perfect," Marnie said, shaking her head. "That's really the cherry on top of our cosmic disaster cake." Despite the gravity of the situation, Finch's mind raced. If they could harness the station's energy, they might be able to get the Last Hope back up to something resembling full operational status. Hell, they might even make it out of this cursed wormhole. "All right," Finch declared, slapping his hands together. "Let's see how much juice we can siphon off without turning ourselves into a footnote in an alien history book." As they worked, the station seemed to react, humming with a life of its own. Energy coursed through the walls, lighting up the corridors in a strange, otherworldly glow. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a visual reminder that they were playing with forces far beyond their understanding. "Feels like we're poking a sleeping dragon," Jax commented, adjusting his grip on the wrench. "Let's just hope it's having a good dream," Marnie replied, eyes fixed on the console where Elwyn was typing madly. The station shuddered again, a deep tremor that vibrated through their bones. Lights flickered, and for a moment Finch thought he heard voices, whispering, laughing, or maybe that was just the sound of his sanity slipping away. Hard to tell these days. Captain Elwyn said, his voice unusually subdued. I think I can stabilize it, but it's risky, really risky, and what's the alternative? Finch asked, already knowing the answer. There was no alternative, not if they wanted to make it out of this with more than just their lives. We're all in, kid. Just tell us what you need. Elwyn nodded, determination in his eyes. All right. I'm going to need Marnie at the main control panel. Jax, try not to break anything important. Captain, you might want to keep an eye on the ship's systems. Got it, Finch said, knowing full well that this was the kind of plan that either ended in triumph or tragedy. The kind of plan he'd gotten far too used to over the years. As they busied themselves with their tasks, the station responded to their efforts with a symphony of lights and sounds. It was beautiful in a way, like watching a star being born. Or maybe that was just the universe setting them up for a cosmic punchline. Marnie was buried in wires, her face a mask of concentration as she worked to reroute power to the last hope. I swear if this thing fries my circuits, I'm coming back to haunt every last one of you, she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. Jax, meanwhile, was doing his best to look useful, which mostly involved hitting things with his wrench and pretending it helped. Don't worry, Marnie. You'll make a great ghost. Maybe you can haunt Elwyn into doing more chores. Elwyn shot him a glare but was too focused on the task at hand to retort. His fingers danced over the console, eyes fixed on the alien symbols that were slowly starting to make sense to him. It was like a puzzle, each piece falling into place with a satisfying click. With a final, decisive keystroke, the station surged with power, lights flaring bright and then settling into a steady glow. The hum in the air intensified, resonating through the corridors like a living pulse. I think it's working, Elwyn said, his voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. Think? Finch echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean you don't know? Elwyn grinned, a wild, reckless grin that spoke of genius and madness intertwined. Captain, in this line of work, thinking is as close as we get to knowing. Finch chuckled despite himself. It was a laugh born of desperation, of the absurdity of their situation, and yet there was hope there too. A glimmer of light in the darkness they'd been stumbling through. As the last hope systems began to come back online, a sense of relief washed over the crew. It was tenuous, fragile, but it was there. They'd managed to pull off the impossible if only for a moment. Well, I'll be damned, Marnie said, stepping back from her console. Looks like we might just make it out of this alive. Don't jinx it, Jax warned, tapping his wrench against his palm. We've still got to get out of this death trap. Finch nodded, knowing full well that their situation was far from resolved. They had power, sure, but they were still trapped in an alien station in the middle of a wormhole that wanted nothing more than to spit them out into the void. All right, team, he said, clapping his hands together. Let's not get too comfortable. We've still got a riddle to solve and a way out to find. Elwyn, still riding the high of their small victory, turned his attention back to the console. The symbols were clearer now, forming patterns that hinted at a deeper meaning. A riddle he was determined to crack. What do you think, Elwyn? Finch asked, watching as the young techie's mind worked at lightning speed. I think this station isn't just a relic, Elwyn replied, his eyes alight with discovery. It's a test, a challenge set by whoever built this place. And I think, he hesitated, a moment of doubt clouding his expression. But the fire of curiosity burned brighter, urging him on. I think I can solve it. If we can understand the riddle, we might find the true purpose of this station. Or set off the mother of all booby traps, Jax said, ever the pessimist. Either way, Finch said, clapping Elwyn on the shoulder, we don't have much choice. If this station is waking up, we need to be ready for whatever it throws at us. With renewed determination, the crew of the Last Hope set to work, each of them driven by a mix of fear, hope, and the stubborn refusal to let the universe have the last laugh. They were explorers, misfits, and reluctant heroes, and for better or worse, this was their adventure. In the depths of an alien labyrinth, they walked the fine line between history and legend, daring the cosmos to do its worst. And as the station hummed around them, whispering secrets of a forgotten age, they knew one thing for certain: they were in for one hell of a ride. The Last Hope was humming like a drunken choir at a spaceport bar, and Finch couldn't help but wonder how many versions of Everything's Fine they'd gone through since entering this cosmic horror show of a wormhole. The station's glow was comforting in a "this might be the light that kills us" sort of way, and their little victory had them all feeling like maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't die in this alien tomb. Finch was about to voice this particularly optimistic thought when the ship's sensors blared the kind of alarm that usually meant brace for impact, or "we're all going to die." Marnie shot him a look from her console. "And here I thought we'd get at least 5 minutes of peace." Elwyn was already back at the console, fingers flying faster than a caffeinated scourge. Captain, you might want to see this." Finch leaned over, peering at the display. His blood ran cold. An alien ship had just dropped out of the void, larger than anything they'd seen. It hung there, ominously still, like a cosmic predator sizing up its prey. The Clerians. Finch had never met them, but their reputation preceded them like a bad smell. "Perfect," Jax grumbled, swinging his wrench like it might somehow help. "Just what we needed, extraterrestrial bureaucrats." "They're hailing us," Marnie said, stabbing at buttons with the kind of precision that suggested she'd rather be stabbing the Clerians. Patching them through. The screen flickered to life, revealing a Clerian in all their unsettling glory. Their features were sharp, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that gleamed like stars. Finch had always thought they looked like someone took a blender to a human and a quartz rock and decided to call it a day. The Clerian spoke, their voice smooth and cold, like liquid nitrogen. "Humans aboard the Last Hope, you have trespassed upon a sacred site of the Clerian Dominion. Cease your activities immediately." Finch cleared his throat, trying to summon up the kind of confidence that didn't come naturally when facing down an advanced alien race with a penchant for annihilation. Hello there. We were just, tidying up the place. Didn't realize it was, sacred." The Clerian's eyes narrowed, which was impressive given they already looked like they were judging the universe for existing. "Your actions have awakened forces beyond your comprehension. The station's riddle is not to be solved by mortals such as yourselves." Marnie rolled her eyes so hard Finch swore he heard them click. "Great, now we have aliens telling us we're not good enough." Elwyn, ever the optimist, leaned in. "But what if we've already started solving it?" "Doesn't that count for something?" The Clerian's gaze shifted to Elwyn, as if considering whether his existence was worth acknowledging. "Continued interference will lead to consequences most dire. The riddle is a test, a warning from those who built this place." "Consequences," Finch echoed, trying to keep the sarcasm in his voice as dry as possible. "Like getting blown out of the sky, or more of a stern letter kind of thing." There was a pause, the kind that made Finch wonder if sarcasm was universal or just a human specialty. "Disintegration," the Clerian replied, as if discussing the weather. That's the one," Jax said, spinning his wrench like a cowboy from a low-budget vid. "Knew it was in there somewhere." Finch sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, we're just trying to fix our ship and get out of this wormhole before it spits us out into oblivion. Surely there's some way we can come to an understanding." The Clerian's expression didn't change, but there was something in the air that suggested amusement. "The only understanding to be had is your immediate withdrawal from the station." "Captain," Elwyn whispered, his voice barely audible over the tension crackling through the air. "I think I can solve it. We can't stop now." "Of course you do," Finch muttered under his breath. "All right, let's say we continue. What's the worst that can happen?" "Disintegration," the Clerian repeated with a hint of relish. Finch considered their options, or rather the glaring lack thereof. They could either trust an alien race with a reputation for being as unforgiving as a solar flare, or they could gamble on Elwyn's knack for getting them into, and occasionally out of, trouble. The choice was blindingly obvious and relentlessly stupid. "We appreciate the warning," Finch said, with the kind of forced cheer that could only come from staring down your own obliteration. "But we're going to keep at it. Gotta run, things to decipher, mortals to prove wrong." The Clerion's image flickered out, leaving the crew with nothing but their own reckless determination and the nagging suspicion they were about to become a footnote in cosmic history. "Well, if this isn't a fine mess," Marnie said, turning back to her console. "We can't just walk away now." "Exactly," Elwyn agreed, his eyes burning with the kind of fervor that would have sparked revolutions back on Earth. "I've got a theory. I think the riddle is a sequence, some kind of code hidden in the symbology. If we can crack it, it might disengage the station's defenses. Or," Jax interjected, "it might blow us up and save the Clerians the trouble." "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," Finch said, clapping Jax on the shoulder with more confidence than he felt. "Or in our case, nothing ventured, nothing exploded." Marnie shook her head, but there was a smile tugging at her lips. "All right, Elwyn, let's see what you've got. And if you get us killed, I'm haunting your dreams." "Dreams?" Jax laughed. "I'll haunt his snacks, see how he likes his chips to start talking back." With a mix of trepidation and resolve, the crew of the Last Hope set to work, guided by Elwyn's increasingly frantic mutterings and the undeniable pressure of the Clerians looming just beyond the station's walls. Elwyn's fingers danced over the alien console, lines of code flaring across the screen like shooting stars. Finch watched, trying not to let the creeping dread seep into his voice. "Any chance you're close, Elwyn?" "Close as a sneeze," Elwyn replied, which could mean anything from almost there to about to blow. "It's all about matching these symbols in the right order. It's like building a bike out of spare parts when you've never seen a bike before." "Great," Marnie said, rolling her eyes. "So we're either going for a ride or falling flat on our faces." Finch couldn't help but chuckle, though it felt more like a reflex than genuine mirth. "Just think of it as cosmic improv. We'll either be heroes or the butt of the universe's joke." Elwyn's hand stilled for a moment, a look of intense concentration etched on his face. Then he pressed a sequence of keys with the kind of determination that suggested he really believed they weren't all going to die. The station responded with a low hum, the lights dimming and then flaring back to life. An alien voice echoed through the room, speaking in a language none of them recognized but all of them understood on some primal level. "That didn't sound like a welcome," Finch muttered, his hand instinctively tightening on his makeshift command chair. Elwyn's face was a mix of triumph and fear. "I think it worked. The riddle was a lock and we just turned the key, or opened Pandora's box," Jax said, his usual bravado undercut by a flicker of uncertainty. "Either way, we didn't explode. Yet." Outside, the Clerian ship remained ominously quiet, a silent judge of their desperate gamble. Finch had the distinct feeling that whatever happened next, they were way beyond their depth, like trying to swim in a black hole. "All right," Finch said, turning to his team. "We've come this far, and I'm not about to let some overgrown space peacock tell us we can't finish the job. Let's see what this station's hiding." Elwyn nodded, returning to the console with renewed vigor. "I've got a path now. We just need to follow it." Marnie glanced at the screen, skepticism etched in every line of her face. "You sure this isn't going to lead us straight into the Clerians' version of a dead end?" "No guarantees," Elwyn admitted, a grin splitting his face. "But that's half the fun, right?" "Sure," Jax replied, hefting his wrench. "If your idea of fun is flirting with death." With a shared look that said, "We're all idiots here," the crew set off down the newly lit corridor, the station guiding them deeper into its labyrinthine depths. The path was lined with alien symbols, glowing softly with a light that seemed to pulse in time with their footsteps. Finch couldn't shake the feeling they were walking into the unknown, with every step a gamble that might finally tip the scales of fate against them. "Well, if this isn't the most ominous hallway I've ever seen," Marnie quipped, her eyes darting from symbol to symbol. Anyone else getting the feeling we're about to find out what's behind door number 3? Door number 1 was certain death, Jax replied. Door number 2 was probable death, and door number 3 is where the prize is, Elwin finished, his voice filled with a certainty that bordered on madness. Finch clapped him on the back. Lead on, fearless leader. If anyone can get us through this, it's you. As they moved deeper into the station, the air grew colder, their breath misting before them like ghosts of all the bad decisions that had led them here. And yet, as the corridor opened into a vast chamber, Finch felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Of course, hope had a way of being as unpredictable as a wormhole, and with the Clearians inches away and the universe poised to strike them down, Finch knew better than to trust it. Whatever awaited them in that chamber, it was a risk they had to take. Because when you were at the end of your rope, dangling over the abyss, the only thing left to do was swing. The Last Hope's engine room was humming louder than Finch's heartbeat, which, given the circumstances, was saying something. Catastrophic events weren't just knocking, they were kicking the door down, asking if anyone wanted to play. The station, in its eerie wisdom, seemed to have taken offense at their audacity and decided to show them what a good old-fashioned cosmic catastrophe looked like. It started with the lights flickering, the kind of flicker that made you wonder if the station was haunted or just trying to save on its electricity bill. Marnie glanced up from her console, her expression a mix of annoyance and resignation, like someone who just realized they left the oven on before leaving for a long trip. "This is why we can't have nice things," she muttered, tapping the screen with the precise level of irritation required to get it working again. How's a girl supposed to get anything done with the lights going on and off like a cheap nightclub? Finch, as ever, was juggling the options in his mind, though none of them were particularly optimistic. "I think we've established that nice things are allergic to us. And the universe has a sick sense of humor." Elwin's fingers flew over the alien symbols, his concentration absolute. "I've almost got it. Just a few more sequences and we might have a way out." "Define might," Jax said, a dubious look on his face that suggested he was already calculating how far his wrench could fly in low gravity. "Because might sounds an awful lot like maybe, and maybe sounds like I should start drinking heavily." "Save it for later," Finch replied, though he couldn't entirely disagree. The idea of a stiff drink was more appealing by the minute. "Right now we need you sober, or at least as sober as you get." As if in response to their collective tension, a klaxon blared through the ship, the sound slicing through the air like a shriek from the universe itself. The ship's automated voice, with all the cheer of a funeral director, announced, "Warning, structural integrity compromised." "Of course it is," Finch said, gritting his teeth. "Because why stop at existential dread when you can throw in a side of imminent collapse, Captain?" "I've got good news and bad news," Elwin said, still focused on his console. "Good news. I think I've found the sequence that could unlock the station's defenses." "Bad news?" Finch asked, though he was fairly certain he already knew the answer. "The bad news is that the sequence is also a countdown. And we're about to run out of time." "Countdown to what?" Jax asked, like a man who expected the answer to be your doom but hoped, just this once, it might be a surprise party. "Disintegration," Elwin replied, not missing a beat. "Right, of course," Jax nodded, accepting the inevitability with the kind of fatalistic humor that had kept them all slightly sane. "Because death really likes to get up close and personal with us." Finch took a deep breath, trying to channel the kind of calm he imagined real captains in inspirational Holovids had, even when their ships were on fire. "We can't just sit here and wait to be vaporized." "Suggestions?" Marnie glanced at her screen, a frown tugging at her lips. "We might be able to reroute some of the power from the station's core, give us a bit more time. But it's a long shot." "Long shots are our specialty," Finch replied, hoping his bravado would mask the fact that his options were dwindling faster than the station's structural integrity. "All right, Elwin, keep working on that sequence." Jax, Marnie, See if you can't keep us from becoming space dust in the meantime." They sprang into action, the weight of their situation subduing any further banter. It was amazing how, faced with the prospect of death, the mind suddenly found clarity, though in this case, clarity was a function of pure, unadulterated panic. Jax was already at a control panel, wrench in hand, muttering under his breath about how he didn't sign up for this, though Finch was fairly sure he'd muttered the same thing when the coffee machine broke. "I can reroute the power," he said, voice grim as he worked, "but this station's like a bad date. It's giving us the silent treatment, and I'm not sure how much more I can sweet-talk it." Marnie was beside him, her fingers a blur on the control panel. "Keep at it, lover boy. We've got a ship to save, and I'm not keen on becoming part of the Clerian Daker." Elwyn's voice cut through the chaos, a thread of hope in the madness. "I've almost got it. Just need a bit more time. Time's a luxury we don't have," Finch replied, though his voice lacked the bite he'd intended. "But keep at it, Elwyn. If anyone can get us out of this mess, it's you." The air was thick with tension, the kind that felt like it might explode if you breathed wrong. Finch watched his crew, a strange blend of pride and desperation swelling in his chest. They were at the end of their tether, but they were still fighting. And if that wasn't worth something, then nothing in this forsaken galaxy was. And then, almost imperceptibly, the station's hum changed. It was subtle, like the difference between a cat purring and a cat deciding it didn't like you anymore. The lights flickered again, and the ship lurched, sending Finch staggering into a bulkhead with all the grace of a one-legged man at a dance. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," Finch shouted, trying to keep his footing as the floor shifted beneath him. Elwyn's fingers sped across the console, the alien symbols blurring together in a dizzying array of light. Almost there, just a little. The lights brightened and the ship stabilized, though Finch could still feel the underlying tension, like a rubber band stretched too far. The countdown had stopped, but the threat hadn't. "What just happened?" Elwyn's face was a mix of relief and disbelief. "I think I've got it. The sequence was a failsafe. We've reset the trap, bought ourselves some time." "Time to do what?" Marnie asked, not looking up from her console, her fingers still flying as if the act itself could keep them alive. "We can't just sit here and wait for the Clerians to decide they're bored of our antics." Finch nodded, feeling the weight of command settle over him like a shroud. "We need to get off this station, but we're not leaving empty-handed. Whatever's in that chamber, it's the key to all of this. We find it, and maybe we find a way to survive." "Always the optimist," Jax muttered, though there was a glimmer of something in his eyes. Hope. Maybe, or maybe just the resigned acceptance of their lot. "All right, let's see what's behind door number 3. The corridor leading to the chamber was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made Finch's skin crawl. It was the silence of waiting, of holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The crew moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the stillness, each step a little prayer that the universe wasn't about to pull the rug out from under them. The chamber doors loomed before them, massive and imposing, inscribed with symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Finch could almost feel the weight of them, like a judge and jury all rolled into one, ready to pronounce sentence. "Any ideas?" Finch asked, half expecting the doors to stay silent, the universe's way of telling him to mind his own business. Elwyn stepped forward, his eyes scanning the symbols with a focus that bordered on reverence. "It's a puzzle. Another part of the riddle. We need to solve it to open the door." "No pressure then," Marnie said, her voice a brittle edge of humor that cut through the tension. Elwyn didn't reply, lost in the symbology, his mind racing through possibilities. Finch watched him, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Everything rested on this, on a hope as thin as gossamer. The minutes stretched, each one an eternity in itself, until finally Elwyn straightened, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "I've got it," he said, his voice a quiet victory in the oppressive silence. "It's a sequence like a song. We just have to play the right notes." He reached out, pressing a series of symbols with the kind of precision that made Finch's heart skip a beat. For a moment, Nothing happened, the world holding its breath in anticipation. And then, with a sound like the universe exhaling, the doors began to open, the stone grinding against the floor as they revealed the chamber beyond. Finch stepped inside, the air cool and still, filled with a presence that spoke of ancient secrets and untold power. At the center of the room stood an object, unlike anything he'd ever seen, its surface shimmering with an inner light that seemed to defy comprehension. "This is it," Elwyn said, his voice a reverent whisper. The heart of the station. Finch approached, feeling the weight of the moment, a mix of awe and trepidation. Whatever they were about to unleash, it was far beyond anything they'd ever encountered. "What now?" Jax asked, his voice echoing in the chamber, as if the very walls were listening, waiting for their decision. "Now we figure out how to use it," Finch replied, feeling the full weight of command settle over him once more. "Whatever happens next, we're not going down without a fight." They gathered around the object, their fates entwined with the flickering light. And for a moment the universe paused, teetering on the edge of possibility. In the depths of despair they found a spark of hope, a hope that might just be enough to save them, or doom them all. As the crew of the Last Hope gathered around the shimmering artifact, Captain Darius Finch felt a bit like a circus ringleader, if said circus was teetering on the brink of annihilation. The chamber was filled with an ambience that suggested ancient importance, though to Finch, it felt more like a cosmic vending machine ready to spit out doom. "Okay, Elwyn," Finch began, trying to project the kind of confidence you need when you're about to gamble with unknown alien technology. "You said this thing is the heart of the station. How do we use it without blowing us all into space confetti?" Elwyn, the kind of genius who always looked one cup of coffee away from a breakthrough, or a breakdown, nodded with that irritating calm reserved for the perpetually sleep-deprived. "The symbols on this device are linked to the station's core systems. I think if we sequence them correctly, we can stabilize the station." Marnie, ever the skeptic, crossed her arms. "Think, you mean you might save us, or you might turn us into a cautionary tale?" "That's the spirit," Jax chimed in, his sarcasm acting as a thin veneer over his genuine apprehension. Nothing like a bit of existential roulette to start the day. Even Clerion, the alien lurking at the edge of the group, seemed intrigued, his obsidian skin reflecting the room's dim light like a disinterested disco ball. "Humans and their blind courage," he mused, his voice a deep hum. "It is both your greatest strength and your inevitable undoing." Finch ignored the alien's commentary, focusing instead on Elwyn. "Okay, let's assume this isn't going to end with us as stardust. What do we do?" Elwyn took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the console like a pianist unsure if the next note would bring applause or boos. "We need to input the sequence and reboot the core. It'll reset the station and hopefully stabilize the wormhole." "Hopefully," Marnie echoed, with a look that suggested she'd have preferred a bit more certainty before betting her life. "Yeah," Elwyn admitted, scratching his head. "The kind of hopeful that involves a leap of faith, or a jump off a cliff, depends on how you look at it." "Faith, Cliff, it's all semantics," Jax quipped. "Either way, there's a drop at the end." Finch looked at his crew, a ragtag group of misfits who he'd trusted with his life more times than he cared to count. They'd stared down death so often it felt like an old friend with a bad habit of overstaying its welcome. "All right, let's do this. Our options are limited, and I'm not ready to start seeing us as a Clerion appetizer." With a collective breath that tasted of desperation and defiance, they set to work. Elwyn began inputting the sequence, the alien symbols lighting up in response, casting eerie shadows across their faces. Each touch was a silent prayer that the universe might give them a break, just this once. The station's hum returned, a low thrumming that filled the air with an expectant energy. Finch felt his heart sink with the rhythm, each beat a reminder of the stakes. This was it, the moment where human tenacity either saved them or proved just how stubbornly foolish they could be. Marnie and Jax monitored the consoles, rerouting power and keeping the ship's systems from deciding that now was the perfect time to take a nap. "How's it looking?" Finch asked, trying to sound more in control than he felt. "The station's responding," Marnie said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Whatever Elwyn's doing, it might actually work. Or we might just be delaying the inevitable," Jax added, because optimism was best served with a side of fatalism. The lights flickered and the floor trembled beneath them, a reminder that even hope came with a hefty price tag. Clerian, watching with the kind of detached interest that suggested he was already composing their obituaries, remarked, "Your resilience is impressive, predictably doomed but impressive." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Finch shot back. "Try to save the eulogy for after we've failed." With a final tap, Elwyn completed the sequence, the console flaring to life as if it had been holding its breath. The station's hum intensified, a deep, resonant note that filled the chamber, vibrating through their bones. "Did it work?" Finch asked, though he hated how much hope colored his voice. Elwyn checked the readouts, his expression a mix of triumph and cautious optimism. "The sequence reset the core, the station's stabilizing." "Well, I'll be damned," Jax muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Turns out faith isn't just a word crazy people throw around." Finch allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Looks like we're buying another day in this chaos." Marnie exhaled, her relief tempered by years of disappointment. "One crisis averted. Now what?" "Now," Finch said, feeling the weight of command shift slightly, "we figure out how to get the hell out of here without pissing off anything else." The station, as if in agreement, returned to its usual state of eerie silence, the lights steady for the first time. Finch turned to Clerian, who remained a picture of alien aloofness. "Any chance your people might cut us some slack after this little escapade?" Clerian regarded him with a contemplative stare. "You humans have an annoying habit of surviving. It's a trait we Clerians both admire and find deeply irritating." "Tell you what," Finch said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "If we make it out of this alive, I'll buy you a drink. You can regale me with just how irritating we really are." Clerian inclined his head, the alien equivalent of a shrug. A curious human tradition, but acceptable. As Finch and his crew prepared to leave the chamber, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air, a rare commodity on the last hope asterisk. They had defied the odds yet again, and while the universe was likely planning its next curveball, they'd face it together. With the knowledge that sometimes human ingenuity could outwit even the most ancient of technologies, they made their way back to the ship. The path wasn't any less dangerous, but at least now it didn't feel quite as hopeless. "Well," Finch said as they reached the ship, "we've bought ourselves some time. Now we just need to figure out how to use it." Jax chuckled, a sound that held more relief than humor. "Time, the one thing we never have enough of, but we'll make do. We always do." Marnie shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. "Let's hope the universe doesn't decide to cash in that favor anytime soon." Finch nodded, feeling a rare flicker of hope as they boarded the last hope asterisk. They had cheated death once more, and while the future was as uncertain as ever, they'd face it on their own terms. And in the end, that was all any of them could really ask for. A chance to fight, to defy the odds, and maybe, just maybe, to come out on top. In the vast, indifferent expanse of space, it was the smallest of victories that mattered most. As the ship powered up, the station behind them pulsing with the life they'd restored, Finch steered them back towards the wormhole, ready to face whatever came next. After all, they were the last hope asterisk, and if anyone could navigate the chaotic dance of fate, it was them. "Brace for impact," Finch muttered, though this time it felt more like a challenge than a warning. Whatever lay ahead, they'd meet it head-on with all the stubborn tenacity humanity had to offer. As they slipped into the wormhole's embrace, Finch couldn't help but think. Against all odds, they'd live to fight another day. And really, wasn't that what it was all about? Elwyn sat hunched over the console, fingers twitching like a pianist who couldn't decide on the next note. The air was thick with anticipation, laced with the ever-present smell of burnt circuits and desperation, a fine vintage of the asterisk last hope asterisk. Captain Finch watched him closely, feeling like a gambler betting his last chips on a horse with 3 legs and a hangover. "Elwyn, this is it," Finch said, trying to sound like he had the slightest clue what was going on. "We need that riddle cracked. Our lives depend on it. No pressure." Elwyn merely grunted, the kind of sound that could mean he was either on the verge of a breakthrough or contemplating the sweet release of unconsciousness. "I'm working on it, Captain. If I had another brain cell, I'd be dangerous." Marnie paced behind them, arms crossed, her skepticism palpable. "I can't believe we're trusting our lives to a puzzle that looks like it was drawn by a drunk squid." "You have a better plan," Jax shot back, leaning against a wall with the kind of nonchalance that screamed, "I'm terrified." "Maybe we can play dead and hope the universe loses interest." "Humans aboard the asterisk last hope asterisk," Clerian intoned, his voice a bass note in the symphony of chaos. "Your defiance is noted. Reckless but noted." "Great," Finch muttered. "Even the aliens got us pegged as lunatics." The console beeped, an uncertain sound that managed to be both hopeful and ominous. It was the kind of sound that preceded either a miracle or a catastrophic failure, and Finch couldn't decide which would be more surprising. Elwyn's eyes flicked back and forth, a manic dance as he deciphered alien symbols that seemed to rearrange themselves just to be difficult. "Almost got it," he mumbled, the words tumbling out in a jumble of caffeine and exhaustion. "Just another minute. Take your time," Jax said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's not like we're hovering on the brink of annihilation or anything." The station's lights flickered, a reminder that even hope had a tendency to short-circuit at the worst possible moment. Finch felt the cold grip of fear in his gut, the kind of primal terror that made a man pray to gods he didn't believe in. "Any chance you might hurry up?" Marnie asked, her voice a thin veneer of calm over a churning sea of anxiety. "Or should we start making peace with our gods, assuming they're not too busy to notice?" "Got it," Elwyn shouted suddenly, a triumphant grin splitting his face like the dawn after a particularly grueling night. Finch blinked, hope rising like a cautious breath. "You sure? Sure as I'm ever going to be," Elwyn replied, punching the final sequence into the console with the flair of a magician revealing his greatest trick. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The station's systems flared to life, lights stabilizing in a soft, steady glow that felt like the first breath after drowning. The hum of the core was a symphony of power and possibility, a monumental shift from the impending doom they'd all been quietly expecting. Marnie exhaled, an incredulous laugh escaping her lips. "I'll be damned, he actually did it." "Looks like we're not cosmic debris just yet," Jax quipped, though relief softened the sarcasm. Clerian tilted his head, an expression that might have been surprise or indigestion. "Your species' ability to survive against the odds is impressive." "Yeah, we're like cockroaches," Finch said with a grim smile. "Hard to kill and even harder to get rid of." The station, now humming with a life of its own, seemed to acknowledge their triumph with a series of gentle pulses, a heartbeat that resonated through the walls and into their bones. Elwyn wiped his brow, a weary but satisfied grin on his face. "Well, that was invigorating. Now can I collapse, or do we need to save the universe again?" "Collapse later," Finch said, clapping him on the back. "We've got a wormhole to navigate, and I'd rather not do it without our resident genius conscious." "Captain," Clerian interjected, his voice a rumble of authority tempered with curiosity. "Your actions have not gone unnoticed by my people. We recognize the unique contribution of your kind." Finch raised an eyebrow, a cynical smile playing on his lips. "So you're saying we're not about to be vaporized for trespassing?" "More or less," Clerian replied, with what might have been an alien version of a shrug. "The Clerian Dominion acknowledges your resolve and offers an alliance." Marnie's eyes widened, skepticism warring with disbelief. "An alliance with us? Are you sure you've got the right humans? Your tenacity is intriguing," Clerian admitted, a hint of grudging respect in his words. Perhaps there is more to your species than meets the eye. Jack snorted, his expression one of amused incredulity. Weirdest compliment I've ever received, but I'll take it. Finch couldn't help but chuckle, the sound rough around the edges but genuine. An alliance, huh? We'll take it. And if we survive this, maybe we'll even live long enough to regret it. The lights of the station flickered in what Finch might have sworn was amusement, as if the universe itself was in on the joke. But the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter, the odds a little less daunting. "Let's get back to the ship and plot our course," Finch said, turning to lead his crew back to the last hope asterisk. "We've got a wormhole to brave and a universe to annoy." As they made their way through the corridors, the station's systems now a reassuring presence rather than a threat, Marnie walked alongside Elwyn. "You really pulled it off," she said, admiration threading through her words. Elwyn shrugged, a self-deprecating smile on his lips. "Just another day at the office. Though if someone could arrange for less apocalyptic stakes next time, I'd appreciate it." "Don't worry," Jax called from ahead, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "I'm sure we'll find a way to mess things up again soon. It's sort of our specialty." With a chorus of relieved laughter, they reached the last hope asterisk, the ship waiting like a faithful dog eager for its next misadventure. Finch boarded first, pausing at the threshold to take in the sight of his worn, battered home. "All right, folks," he said, turning to face his crew with a confidence that felt almost natural. "Let's get the hell out of here." They piled into the control room, each taking their place with the kind of practiced ease that came from years of barely controlled chaos. Marnie manned the navigation, Jax at the comms, and Elwyn ready to fiddle with whatever tech decided to throw a tantrum next. Finch settled into the captain's chair, feeling the familiar embrace of its worn fabric. "Ready for wormhole navigation?" he asked, though they all knew the answer was a resounding no. "Ready as we'll ever be," Marnie replied, her fingers dancing over the controls with a confidence that belied the uncertainty of their situation. "Good," Finch said, a determined glint in his eyes. "Let's go poke the universe and see if it pokes back." The ship vibrated beneath them, systems humming with a life of their own as they approached the gaping maw of the wormhole. It was a sight that never failed to inspire a mix of awe and dread, the swirling currents of space-time, a reminder of just how small they were in the grand scheme of things. "Here goes nothing," Finch muttered, gripping the armrests as the ship plunged forward, the world dissolving into a kaleidoscope of light and motion. The journey through the wormhole was as disorienting as ever, a roller coaster ride designed by a madman with a grudge against stability. Finch gritted his teeth, determined to keep the ship steady as they rode the cosmic currents. "Hold on, everyone," he called over the comms, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. "This is going to be bumpy." The ship shuddered, metal groaning in protest as they were tossed about like a leaf in a storm. Finch's knuckles whitened on the controls, a silent prayer on his lips that they'd emerge in one piece. And then, with a lurch that left them all gasping for breath, they burst free of the wormhole's grasp, the stars falling into place around them like old friends welcoming them home. "Status report," Finch demanded, his voice hoarse but steady. "All systems green," Elwyn replied, eyes scanning the readouts with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "We're in one piece. Imagine that." "Well, I'll be damned," Finch said, a weary grin spreading across his face. "Looks like we cheated death again." "Won't be the last time," Jax quipped, though relief softened the edge in his voice. Marnie leaned back in her chair, exhaling a long breath. "So, where to next, Captain?" Finch considered their options, the expanse of space before them a blank canvas waiting for their next adventure. He glanced at Clerion, who watched them with an expression that might have been approval. "Wherever the universe decides to throw us," Finch said finally, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "After all, we're the last hope asterisk. Chaos is kind of our thing." With that, he set a course for the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For better or worse, they were a crew, a family of misfits bound by circumstance and shared insanity. And really, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't that what it was all about? The asterisk last hope asterisk was a piece of junk, but she was their piece of junk. Finch watched the familiar glow of the ship systems come online with a mix of relief and exasperation. The hum of machinery was like a lullaby to his nerves, and he let himself sink into the captain's chair with a sigh. It was a moment of peace, but one that felt temporary, like a ceasefire during a galactic family squabble. "All right," Finch said, glancing around at his crew, who looked just as shocked as he felt that they were still in one piece. "Let's make sure this tin can doesn't fall apart before we even get out of the driveway." Marnie gave him a thumbs up, already elbow-deep in the ship's navigation system. "I've got it covered, Captain. Just keep your fingers crossed it holds together." Finch chuckled dryly. Fingers crossed, rabbit's feet, and whatever else might bring us luck. Knowing our ship, it'll need all that plus a miracle. Jax leaned back in his chair at the comms with the sort of ease that suggested he'd already accepted his fate as space dust. "If it does fall apart, can I put in a request to haunt the engine room? I swear it whispers sweet nothings to me at night." Elwyn, still riding the adrenaline high of outsmarting alien tech, grinned like a man who just won an unwinnable card game. "As long as it doesn't ask you out to dinner, I think you'll be fine." Clerion, their unexpected alien ally, observed this exchange with the kind of bemused curiosity that made Finch wonder if they'd ever really understand each other. "Your humor is unique," Clerion remarked. "Does it always mask fear?" Finch shrugged. "Pretty much. If you can't laugh in the face of impending doom, you're in the wrong line of work. Or on the wrong ship," Marnie added as she brought up a detailed schematic of the ship's integrity. "Looks like we're holding together, for now." "Great," Finch said, clapping his hands together. "Let's see if we can make it back to friendly space without tempting fate any more than we have to." With the ship systems responding like an old dog being asked to do tricks it had long since forgotten, the crew set about preparing for the trip back home. The Clerions had promised assistance, offering a few technical tweaks that might just keep the ship's guts from spilling out into the void. It was both reassuring and unnerving how casually they could patch up technology that was decades behind their own. "Captain," Clerion said, turning his attention to Finch, "our engineers will rendezvous with us shortly. They have been instructed to assist with your repairs." Finch nodded. "Appreciate it. Just hope our ship doesn't scare them off." As if on cue, the ship shuddered, a low grumble echoing through the corridors. Finch winced. "See, she's just saying hello." Elwyn leaned against the console, still fiddling with the handheld device that had been both bane and boon during their little escapade. "I think I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. If the Clerions show me what I'm not supposed to touch, I might be able to give her a tune-up." Jack smirked. "Famous last words." "I'll be sure to say something nice at your funeral." "Noted," Elwyn shot back, eyes twinkling with mischief. The ship's comms crackled to life, signaling the arrival of the Clerion engineers. They were an odd bunch, all multi-limbed grace and inscrutable expressions, moving through the ship with the efficiency of a hive mind. Finch watched them with a mixture of awe and suspicion, wondering how they viewed his ragtag crew. "Do you think they have any idea what a mess we've made of their sacred site?" Marnie murmured, watching the Clerions work. "Probably," Finch replied. "But they're too polite to mention it, or they're plotting our demise in very subtle ways." "Plotting aside," Elwyn interjected, "their tech is incredible. Just look at how they integrate energy systems. Makes our stuff look like it was built from spare parts and hope." "Which it sort of was," Jax pointed out helpfully. The repairs went surprisingly smoothly, which in Finch's experience was usually a precursor to everything going horribly wrong. But for once, fortune seemed to be on their side. The ship's systems hummed with a renewed vigor, the Clerions having coaxed it into a semblance of reliability. As the last of the engineers departed, Clerion approached Finch. "Your vessel is now capable of returning to your territories. We will ensure the wormhole remains stable for your passage." Finch offered a wry grin. "Thanks for the assist. I'd say we owe you one, but I'm not sure how much more we can barter with." Clerion inclined his head. Your survival is payment enough. We shall look forward to future cooperation. Future cooperation, Jax echoed, raising an eyebrow. Is that alien for let's not do this again anytime soon? Possibly, Marnie said, her voice tinged with amusement. Or maybe it's a compliment, hard to tell. With a final round of goodbyes, the Clerions departed, leaving the last hope to its fate. Finch took a deep breath, steeling himself for their journey home. All right, crew. Time to show the universe we know how to make a graceful exit. The ship eased into motion, engines thrumming with a confidence that seemed almost alien after their recent adventures. As they approached the wormhole, Finch couldn't help but feel a mix of trepidation and triumph. Navigating the cosmic chaos had become second nature, the blend of fear and exhilaration and addiction he couldn't shake. Entering the wormhole, Marnie announced, her voice steady. Brace yourselves. The familiar maelstrom enveloped them, the ship tossing and turning like a drunk on a bender. Finch held the controls with a white-knuckled grip, fighting for stability against forces that wanted nothing more than to fling them into oblivion. Remind me why we do this again, Jax muttered, clutching his seat for dear life. Because we're idiots, Finch replied, teeth gritted against the chaos. Idiots with a death wish. Speak for yourself, Elwyn called out, though his voice carried a note of exhilaration. I'm just here for the science. Science madness, Marnie said with a chuckle. Same difference. With a final teeth-rattling jolt, the ship slipped free of the wormhole's grip, coasting into the blessed calm of normal space. Finch let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief flooding through him like a shot of adrenaline. Status, he asked, glancing at Elwyn. All systems nominal, Elwyn reported, his grin infectious. Looks like we made it. Home sweet home, Finch murmured, staring out at the familiar starscape. Let's hope they've missed us. As the ship approached their home territories, the comms crackled to life with an incoming transmission. Finch recognized the voice of Admiral Harrigan, their ever-dire superior whose tone suggested he'd been chewing on broken glass. Captain Finch, this is Admiral Harrigan. I trust you have explanations for your unauthorized detour. Finch winced, glancing around at his crew. You could say we got a bit sidetracked, Admiral. Sidetracked, Harrigan repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. And how exactly does that involve an alliance with the Clerions? Finch shared a rueful grin with his crew. Guess we made an impression. The silence on the line was palpable, broken only by a resigned sigh from the Admiral. Report to headquarters upon arrival, and Finch, good work, somehow. As the comms clicked off, Jax let out a low whistle. I'd call that a ringing endorsement. Coming from Harrigan, Marnie said, shaking her head. It's practically a medal. The atmosphere on the ship lightened, the tension of their ordeal giving way to a sense of camaraderie and accomplishment. They'd faced down impossible odds and lived to tell the tale, and for once it seemed like the universe wasn't actively plotting their demise. So what now? Elwyn asked, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. Return to boring, day-to-day survival. Finch considered the question, the vastness of space stretching out before them like an unwritten story. Nah, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. I think we've got a few more adventures left in us. Clerion, who had remained silent throughout their exchange, finally spoke. Your actions have opened new paths for your kind. The Clerion Dominion is. Interested in what you might achieve? Finch nodded, feeling the weight of possibility settle on his shoulders. No pressure, right? Just the usual existential stakes, Jax quipped, drawing chuckles from the crew. As the last hope made its way back to familiar stars, Finch allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Their journey had been a litany of near disasters and unexpected alliances, but it had also shown them the vast potential of the universe. They were a crew of misfits, but they were his misfits, and together they defied the odds in ways that left even the cosmos blinking in surprise. All right, folks, Finch said, settling back into his captain's chair with a satisfied grin. Let's go see what kind of trouble we can stir up next. With the ship cruising through the stars, each crew member found their own moment of reflection. Marnie lost herself in the constellations passing by, while Jax idly tapped out a rhythm on the console, a song only he could hear. Elwyn, ever the tinkerer, was already plotting their next technological marvel, fingers itching for the challenge. And Finch just felt content, at least until the next crisis came knocking, which, knowing their luck, wouldn't be far off. But for now, they were alive, their ship was in one piece, and they were heroes. Or close enough anyway. As they sailed towards the future, the stars stretched out before them like a promise, and Finch knew there was nowhere else he'd rather be.